With the replacement of the SKX009 and 007 shifting into the Seiko 5 family as a non-professional diver and transformed into an entry-level everyday watch with the ingeniously nicknamed 5KX collection, that naturally begs the question, which is currently the best diver from Seiko under $500? Well, today I take a look at two amazing options currently on the market for well below that price in 2021. Okay, hi guys, and welcome to the show. Now, before we get into it, I'll do a quick wristwatch check. Wearing the Rolex Explorer on the Mark II strap I co-designed with Wrist Candy Watch Club, of course, to match my jacket, right? It has to be done. I will leave a link to that in the description, so please do check it out. What else? Oh, and by the way, guys, for some reason, a lot of you are still not getting notified when I post a new video, so make sure you hit that notification bell. And of course, like this video if you'd like to see more comparative reviews at this price range, or comparing two watches, that kind of thing, so I can gauge your interest, and of course comments and all the rest of it. And lastly, a big thank you to Moyer Jewelers, an authorized AD for Seiko, for lending these in. And as you guys know, I personally buy and sell to them all the time, so a massive thank you. Since the 1990s, the SKX line of divers, primarily the 009 and 007, has been the go-to professional level dive watch at the affordable price range. Its ISO certified status, inherited design language from decades of illustrious divers that preceded them, infinite modability, but above all affordability made it a cult classic. You saw it in the watch boxes of almost every collection, from first-time converts who have just bought their first mechanical watch, or professional divers, and even those who typically collect only luxury. There they were, holding their own against the big boys, respected, revered, and even becoming cinematic icons, a fate few watches achieve in such a relatively short lifespan. In 2019, the reign of the SKX007 and 009 as the best divers, and most popular for that matter, under $500, came to an end, and naturally was met by much derision among watch enthusiasts. It was discontinued and evolved into a new incarnation as the backbone of the rejuvenated Seiko 5 line. So who wears the crown these days at Seiko for divers under $500? Well, you've got a ton of options. You've got the Arnie, of course, massively historically important and a cinematic icon, hence the name. Then you have endless solar variations that are a fantastic, affordable option. And my personal favorite, the Seiko Turtle, if you want history, which I've previously reviewed, of course. And then there's the Samurai and the Monster. So I've selected a Samurai from 2017 and a Monster from 2019. So how do they compare? Let's take a closer look. Compared to other dive watches from Seiko, the Seiko Monster and Samurai both have a fairly short history. The Monster originally was introduced as the Seiko SKX009 in 2000, with the then typical 7S26 movement day-date caliber. Its bold, aggressive and masculine looks immediately made it stand out, and naturally something of a Marmite watch, as you either loved it or absolutely loathed it. It wasn't until the second generation, a year later in 2001, with an even more outlandish version, the classic orange, that it earned the nickname Monster. This was mainly due to having fang-like hour markers, unlike the rectangular of its predecessor, of course along with its brutalist looks. Over 2 decades it would continue to evolve in countless versions, becoming even more flamboyant, most notably the budget versions in the Seiko 5 line like the Snow Monster and Baby Monster, and even becoming something of a mountaineering watch with the Trek Monster and its navigational bezel. My personal favourite is the super macho Night Monster in PVD. The Samurai, on the other hand, had an even shorter history, despite also being the culmination of the brand making dive watches for half a century. It was first released in 2004 with an entirely titanium case, along with the 7S25 date-only movement and a water resistance, just like the Monster, of 200 meters. Black with the SBDA001, blue with the 003, and orange with the 005. It was extremely well received and quickly was recognized as an ISO-rated professional diver just as much, if not more, as the Monster. But speaking of the Monster, the exaggerated broad arrow and sword handset were borrowed from the Monster no less, and in combination with its angular, modernist case shape, by this time it had quickly become known as the Samurai, as it resembled the armor of feudal Japanese warriors. But despite its success and being well received, it would not be for another 13 years until we saw a second generation in 2017.
Prospects, automatic divers, Seiko.
And since then, there have been over 20 iterations of new King Samurais in 2020 with various limited editions. And like the Monster, that culminated in it graduating into the Prospects line. So we'll start with the dimensions first, and as there's two watches here, I'll save a little bit of time with the old calipers and I'll put it on screen for you. And as you can see, there's really not that much difference in scale between them. The Monster is a tad smaller in diameter, but essentially these are very modern in their scale. I have to say, on wrist, the Monster certainly wears much better. I don't know what it is. I think it's the way the lugs are a little bit shorter and angled down. Also, because of the links, if you see in the links, they're actually quite small, so you can get much more precise fit. In terms of materials, well, they're both stainless steel. The difference is, of course, on the Samurai you have the aluminium insert, and then we have Hardlex crystal on both of them. The bezel on the Monster is steel, and I'm pretty sure it's a coating of some kind, although I cannot find out precisely what it is, but it is engraved, so this is a little bit more robust compared to the aluminium insert on Samurai. Now, the first thing you'll probably notice is that these engraved numerals are filled in with a kind of cream color that matches the off-white of the applied loom plots, whereas we have a bicolor set up here. So this is obviously a lot more legible at a quick glance, but they both do a pretty good job. Both bezels are 120 click, really quite solid feeling, especially on the Samurai, and a little bit more difficult to grip. I have to say the bezel on the Monster absolutely is the kipper's knickers. It's easy to turn, but because it's only accessible here and here, you have this side exposed with these very wide grooves, so very easy to grip. It's very pleasing. It feels a little bit like a lock on the safe, you know, I think the combination lock, that's it. And it lines up perfectly. There's a little bit more play on here, but really nothing to complain about. In terms of the luminescence, well, this is that fantastic Lumi-Bright. You couldn't ask for a better proprietary luminescence. Very long lasting, perfect orientation, of course, because we have these massive shapes. The Samurai has these trapezium shapes, whereas the Monster has the slightly larger rectangles, but both work fantastically. And of course, these Monster handsets, it's very easy to distinguish hours from minutes. And one of my favorite features about these hands, they form a rocket when the minute hands pass over the hours. Both watches have a depth rating of 200 meters, but I have to say, in terms of purchase and grip, the crown on the Samurai here with that fantastic knurling is just that much better. The Monster, on the other hand, feels a little bit grainy, a little bit more wobbly, difficult to get purchase on it in comparison. So in terms of the movement, well, this is where it really gets interesting. They pretty much have the same movement, the 4R35 in the Samurai and the 4R36 in the Monster. They are identical in specifications. The only difference is having the added complication on the Monster there. Apart from that, pretty much the same, both introduced in 2011. These calibers were considered an upgrade from the popular 7S26 movement, and it offers the user the very desirable hacking, hand winding functionality, and they both operate at the slow 21,600 vibrations an hour. Quick set, about a 40-hour power reserve, and all the inherent traits of Seiko in-house calibers like the magic lever system and for that bidirectional winding. Very, very efficient watches. Now Seiko states, prepare yourself, and this is for both movements, plus 45 plus minus per day, that kind of deviation out of the factory, but typically it's never that bad. They're very easy to regulate yourself. I was getting about +4 out of the Samurai and about +5 out of the Munster, and pretty much interchangeable. So yeah, they're rock solid, absolutely fantastic movements, affordable to maintain, easy to repair, and extremely, extremely robust. Everything Seiko is famed for. The Seiko Munster has its design rooted in several key important divers from Seiko. Most obviously, the tuner. As its name implies, the tuner had a shrouded case that gives it its name, a bit like a can of tuna. However, unlike the tuner, the Munster had more conventional lugs that are part of the shrouded sections. The concave shape of the bezel, along with its cog-like wheel edge that is highly, highly ergonomic, along with the hands, that broad arrow hand, is so, well, it's absolutely unique to the Munster, even though the handset, as you see with the Samurai, has permeated into other collections. But it is unique to the Munster. Stylistically, it especially works well with the matte black of the bezel, in my opinion. However, the dial layout is a more enlarged mix of rectangles and a double shield shape at the 12 o'clock, found in many generations of divers during the 1970s. The most influential of all is perhaps the 6105-8119, aka the Captain Willard from 1968, that very much started to trend. But the double marker can also be seen as far back as Seiko's very first diver, the mighty 62 Mass from 1965. The difference being, of course, the refinement in the shapes. For whatever reason, the generations in between the 62 Mass and those of the 1970s favoured circular markers. Another thing I do adore about this particular version, and probably why I chose it to review, is that deep, rich Aegean blue, that sunburst effect. It's a very deep blue, and it very much evokes the ocean, and I think complements the dark, almost black matte grey of the bezel perfectly. The Samurai, on the other hand, is a far more original design, as its futuristic-looking case and bezel are unlike any Seiko diver that came before. This is then combined with the Munster dial layout and handset that complements the overall sci-fi look of the Samurai perfectly. This was introduced with the second generation of Samurai in 2017 and onwards. Before then, it had the classic Marine Master handset with the traffic light tip on the seconds that dates back to the second generation of divers from Seiko, like the 62-15-7000 and the 61-59-7001 from the late 60s. Incidentally, these were the first Seiko divers to have the now common 4 o'clock crown. The very first Seiko Samurai was only available in titanium and was a Japanese domestic release only. It took some while before the international release came out, and that was with the second generation, and they introduced for the first time the waffle dial, which has come and gone over the years, but we see it in this particular version from 2017. The version we are looking at here has the dial in a dark charcoal grey, the only pop of colour being the cherry red tip to the second hand. Another subtle difference between these two watches is the chapter rings on each. The Munster's applied markers are slightly embedded into the more gently and wider sloping ring at the periphery, while the Samurai has the more refined, precise hash marks that corresponds to the beat rate of the movement. The knurling on the side of the Samurai's bezel and crown give it much more of an industrial feel, further enhancing the austere modernist aesthetic, while the Munster has more organic, rounded shapes and grooves, making it seem somewhere between a creation of H.R. Giger mixed with late 1970s Soviet brutalist architecture. Both watches are completed beautifully, with the iconic Great Wave of Kanagawa motif in a raised high polish, contrasted by the concentric brushed finish of the caseback. So what are the negatives? Well, you probably expect this, and I'm kind of fed up of complaining about it, but the bracelets are absolutely awful. I can't stand them. The links, when you size this, really makes me worried about even wearing it, because the pin links are just so dated now. You got micro brands for the same price offering screw links, so you know, I don't see why Seiko can't do that. The finishing of them, you know, the mix of brush and high polish on the side, I think on this one, and then on this we got little sections on the center, because these are essentially Y-shaped links that are in high polish. The finishing is not bad. I much prefer the way it integrates on the Munster. If you see, it's just a bit more neater. The stamped clasps feel incredibly flimsy. In fact, when I was trying to work out the diver extension, they both have it, by the way, they kind of bent out of shape, and the flip lock there is not really anything to write home about either. The diver extension just basically, it's a bit tricky to do. Let me, oh, damn it. You flip it out and then you unhook this bit and you've got a very rudimentary diver extension. I don't like it at all. This actually is easy to bend and quite finicky to do. You need a screwdriver, really. So forget about wearing gloves, you know, with your scuba equipment if you were going to use this professionally. And then to get it back in, Jesus, I'm afraid of it breaking. So really, I loathe the bracelets on these. It tapers a little bit, but then it's still, you know, so chunky. I wish it tapered like a Rolex bracelet or like a Laurier bracelet. If you want a good example of an affordable bracelet done right, look at Laurier. I mean, look, if I'm going to buy one of these, I'd bung it on a NATO. I'd bung it on a strap, a nice rubber strap or something, you know. I also think these untapering bracelets just add so much unnecessary weight. Even though I have to say the end links are solid, and it's nice that they've included spring bar holes. So these are very easy to change out indeed. Another disadvantage you don't get on the Samurai, but obviously you do get with the Munster, is that slow changing date, because it is multilingual. It does take a few hours, a typical characteristic of older or entry level movements, unfortunately. Normally I critique the size, but these are divers, they're supposed to be big, and due to the short lugs on each, they actually wear small. So no issues there, even on my 6.5-inch wrist, although they are rather chunky. Cyclops is a divisive point, will alienate some, but I think it actually does a pretty good job, so I don't mind it. My last two negatives are not the end of the world, but obviously it doesn't have that James Bond versatility when it comes to one's attire. They are both audaciously bold and brash, very tool-tastic. They wouldn't go with a jacket like this or with a suit, for example. I mean, I think that's pretty obvious. The very last negative is the dated movements. I'd love to see the 6R family instead of the 4R with that huge 70-hour power reserve. That would really boost the practicality of the watch. But again, this is why these are so affordable and under $500. I think that would push them up to between $5,000 and $1,000. So, which is the better watch? Well, I don't think there is a definitive answer. I have my favorite out of the two. I'll get into that in just a moment, but they are quite neck and neck. I think it's very much a matter of personal taste and a matter of preference. But there is one that I have enjoyed a bit more. If you want to go for functionality, you should get an Ani Digi Arnie. If, like me, you desire something with more historicity, you may prefer the Mini Turtle. The Munster and Samurai actually have a lot more in common and are both something more of an acquired taste compared to the other heavy hitters in the entry level just mentioned when it comes to Seiko. To me, the Munster has a slight edge. Its case design makes it more compatible with large wrists and small, while having almost as much dial space and therefore legibility as the Samurai. It's a tamer beast compared to the very first generations, and I feel has been refined perfectly without losing its key character or identity. The addition of the day complication also makes it more practical for every day. And I'm just such a big fan of that bezel. It's incredibly enjoyable to use. Will it have the same effect the classic SKX009 and 007 had? Well, frankly, I don't think so. I doubt we will ever see that level of proliferation into almost every other experienced collector's rotation, or how the SKX also became the first serious watch for so many newcomers to the hobby. Not to mention the cult-like modern culture that arose around them, even if there are a ton of fun and collectible variations of both Samurai and Monster. The SKX phenomenon is something we will never see again, but the watches in question here today are just as, if not more capable real divers, meeting all the ISO 6425 standards. Now, both at the end of the day are absolutely fantastic and worthy of respect. Few brands can compete with Seiko when it comes to history and their heritage, especially in the dive watch area at this level. I mean, it's amazing value for money, especially considering these are completely proprietary made. Yes, I know there are some other brands that at this level, Orient for example, but not with the heritage, not with that lineage to back it up. So I'm going to leave it there. Which was your favorite? What other comparisons would you like to see on the channel? Please do add that in the comments. Don't forget to like this video. Thank you very, very much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. Okay, ciao.